How does your organization view high potential talent development?
I think one story that stands out is, first of all, is the fastest integration in the history of IT and what has happened here. I think, so kudos to SNS and the entire team who actually got this together. I was a part of this particular merger and from an HR side and getting the talent on board. I think one thing that clearly stands out is to have your skin in the game. That is one very, very important thing. I think the second thing is where we tracked a couple of them. So over the last 2 years, we've seen that we have almost had a 67% throughput out of our 90 people that we were tracking. So I think numbers is very, very important, just not from a measure of success perspective, but also to understand that how is each one of them going to contribute to the larger thing. So I think 3 things we did well. One is we got the buy-in from the CXOs. So we have that buy-in. That's the first thing. And we said that we're going to align with the strategic goals of the organization. The second thing that we did is we identified the critical roles before we could move forward. I think that's the second most important thing. And the third important thing that we did is we didn't make up projects. We told them to involve or get involved along with CXOs in the high stake projects that are on. I think these 3 things brought together, along with the expertise of erstwhile LT and Mindfree, could actually or spelled out success for our succession planning program.
And in my experience, there's not just a traditional vertical movement, but a lot of the career progressions actually horizontal, where folks are moving from one skill to the other. And it's completely different from what they were, actually doing maybe for the past 5 years. And that's celebrated, that's appreciated. So if a HiPo program is being designed, it has to take care of this context. So maybe focus on the skills of the future. Bring in industry stalwarts for, just leadership sessions. Have those brainstorming connects where they can talk about what's really upcoming and how is it that they can upskill. And a lot of just industry insights. And this one I feel is the game changer. Not have clearly defined career paths. And I know this is tricky, but letting the participants, of the program really just decide what their career path would look like. Because like I said, it's not necessary that it's going to be a vertical progression, but it could also be just, skill movement and a horizontal progression.
But one thing that has really helped us grow this talent better has been a constant evaluation process. I think any program needs to have a very defined timeline and evaluation in place. Because it's a very personalized program. You have to really work on the personalized development for individuals that you have identified for. So it cannot be one glove for all kind of a setup. You really have to make sure that we are figuring out what's a skill gap, individual person base, and how do we make sure that the person is getting a regular term feedbacks on how the progression is. So I think that is something which is very, very important that I feel has happened. The other thing that really works very nice for us is cross-functional or cross-geographical. When you're working in a global setup, it is very important to figure out different cultures together. It is very important to know that, especially in a place like hospitality, where we are actually dealing with a global clientele, it is very important to have a customer centricity, which is very global to talk about. So understanding those cultures, understanding how things are moving ahead, how and what is being treated in one culture versus the other, is that level of knowledge is extremely important. So that kind of becomes a very core of most of our programs. And the third thing that we focus a lot is the diversity piece of it.
Coming up next is a very interesting conversation. From the world of consulting, I am now going to move on to the world of technology and service, which is the IHG hotels. Tech as a sector has really transformed the way we are doing work. It's put us from the India story to a global story, both in terms of services as well as in terms of product. Joining me on this panel is Carlton, Senior Director LTI Mindtree, Tanya, Talent and Leadership Development Specialist who's worked with several product organizations, and Sneha from the IHG Hotels, Senior Manager, Learning, Talent and Culture. Sneha, Tanya, welcome to the Impact Playbook. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Vivek. Doing very well. Thank you so much for having me here. I've been listening into the conversations for over an hour now, and I'm making copious notes.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Carlton, welcome. Good to see you.
Yeah, hi Vivek. Good morning. Good morning, Tanya. Good morning, Sneha.
Good morning, Sneha. Good morning, Carlton.
Morning, both of you. Morning, Vivek. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to this conversation, and I'm really excited to be here, honestly. I mean, I love the facts, the kind of discussion that is currently going on, and just the time of the year to do that, actually.
Team, let me start off, Carlton, and perhaps I'll start off with you on this one. Okay. How does your organization view high potential talent development? What stories come to your mind as you look at talent development, especially for an organization your size and scale?
Yeah. So thank you, Vivek. I think here at LTI Mindtree, with the recent, just over 2 years ago, LTI and Mindtree got together. I think we right now are about an 85,000 strong workforce that is there. I think, and the important thing is getting talent from both parties, or from the erstwhile Mindtree and erstwhile LTI, to get together working. I think one story that stands out is, first of all, is the fastest integration in the history of IT and what has happened here. That's, I think, so kudos to SNS and the entire team who actually got this together. I was a part of this particular merger, and from an HR side and getting the talent on board. I think one thing that clearly stands out is to have your skin in the game. That is one very, very important thing. I think the second thing is where we tracked a couple of them. So over the last 2 years, we've seen that we have almost had a 67% throughput out of our 90 people that we were tracking. So I think numbers is very, very important, just not from a measure of success perspective, but also to understand that how is each one of them going to contribute to the larger thing. So I think 3 things we did well. One is we got the buy-in from the CXOs. So we have that buy-in. That's the first thing. And we said that we're going to align with the strategic goals of the organization. The second thing that we did is we identified the critical roles before we could move forward. I think that's the second most important thing. And the third important thing that we did is we didn't make up projects. We told them to involve or get involved along with CXOs in the high stake projects that are on. I think these 3 things brought together, along with the expertise of erstwhile LTI and Mindtree, could actually or spelled out success for our succession planning program.
So CXO leadership buy-in,
Yes.
alignment to strategic goals. So the third one was a very interesting one. What I hear from you is you pulled these people in and made them a part of existing projects. You do not really create new projects. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
I think, Vivek, that's more important. Creation is one thing. You and I can buy off case studies and do it. But what about the actual skin in the game in the exact position? Because that's where the CXOs came back. It says you create beautiful programs, but what about the real issue at hand? How? And along with that, the mentoring and the guidance by the CXOs actually transform them into the leaders that they are today. And that's,
so there was a component of project work and then of existing business project work, and a translation of that with mentorship from, of course, the CEOs, the CXOs, etc. within the organization. Is that correct?
That's right, Vivek. That's it.
Thank you so much, Carlton. Tanya, I'm going to pull you in next on this conversation. You work with some really strong tech teams. You also work with really strong service delivery teams. What comes to your mind as you look at high potential programs?
Yeah. I think this is interesting because we do have traditional high potential development programs, right? But I feel like the tech industry is just ever changing. It's so volatile in terms of the skills that an individual really needs. And I know that folks within the industry are constantly upskilling. And in my experience, there's not just a traditional vertical movement, but a lot of the career progressions actually horizontal, where folks are moving from one skill to the other. and it's completely different from what they were, actually doing maybe for the past 5 years. And that's celebrated, that's appreciated. So if a HiPo program is being designed, it has to take care of this context. So maybe focus on the skills of the future. Bring in industry stalwarts for just leadership sessions. Have those brainstorming connects where they can talk about what's really upcoming and how is it that they can upskill, and a lot of just industry insights. And this one I feel is the game changer. Not have clearly defined career paths. And I know this is tricky. But letting the participants, of the program really just decide what their career path would look like. Because like I said, it's not necessary that it's going to be a vertical progression, but it could also be just, skill movement and a horizontal progression. So I feel like it wouldn't be traditional for sure.
No, this is very interesting, and it's a very interesting difference, and that's the reason why I wanted you all to be here. So what you're telling me is, get in the inputs from outside, get the outside in view very regularly, get those industry stalwarts, get all the outside in perspectives into your organization, and be comfortable in the way people want to meander their career. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I feel like meander is the right word, and as we say, all those who wander are not lost. And I feel like that's what is needed today, especially in certain industries where there's just so much volatility.
Right. I think fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing this. Sneha, I'm curious to learn from you. Hotels as a sector.
I'm sorry, Vivek, I'm not sure, but I can't hear you. I think you're back.
I'm so sorry about this.
No worries.
Sneha, curious to hear the hotel's point of view around this high potential talent development.
I honestly feel that everything that Carlton and Tanya just said, I feel that, some things are just not industry specific. It's just so common across. It is such a global phenomenon to talk about. When we talk about the high potential program specific to us as an industry, there are a few things that we probably are doing little other than what the other industries might just be into. But one thing that has something that has really helped us grow this talent better has been a constant evaluation process. I think any program needs to have a very defined timeline and evaluation in place, because it's a very personalized program. You have to really work on the personalized development for individuals that you have identified for. So it cannot be one glove for all kind of a setup. You really have to make sure that we are figuring out what's a skill gap, individual person base, and how do we make sure that the person is getting a regular term feedbacks on how the progression is. So I think that is something which is very, very important that I feel has happened. The other thing that really works very nice for us is cross-functional or cross-geographical. When you're working in a global setup, it is very important to figure out different cultures together. It is very important to know that, especially in a place like hospitality, where we are actually dealing with a global clientele, it is very important to have a customer centricity, which is very global to talk about. So understanding those cultures, understanding how things are moving ahead, how and what is being treated in one culture versus the other, is that level of knowledge is extremely important. So that kind of becomes a very core of most of our programs. And the third thing that we focus a lot is the diversity piece of it. So we have a program only for women journal managers, which is called RISE. It is a global program. It is a grown process just to how do we develop women journal managers to talk about it. So diversity and inclusion is another piece that gets very in heart of it, because what happens is by not by choice, but a lot of times, a lot of our high potentials will miss out on that diversity angle. And sometimes some of us really need that push. Not all of us are really that extrovert to come out and say that, invest on me. So correct. I think sometimes that also plays a bit of a part in that.
Very fair points. Team, I'm curious about this one thing, right? Attrition and investments in people, right? Sneha, you invest in a hotel building, for example. The building is gonna be with you the rest of your at least foreseeable future, right? You invest in people, and that too not just an ordinary person, a person who is perhaps ambitious, a person who has a lot of drive, and also wants to look out for himself or herself, get more returns on their time, right? How do you think about attrition and investment in this talent? Does your leadership not question you guys? We invest in these people. What happens if he or she leaves tomorrow? We invest in this person and we don't get. How do I know that I'm getting the return of the buck? So ROI. I'll just love to invite your thoughts around it. Tanya, why don't I start with you this time? Sneha, I'll come to you next, and Carlton, I'll come to you next around this. So my specific question is, A, how do you get the investments buy-in from your senior leaders? That would be one. Second would be, how do you view talent's retention on that particular investment over a period of time, right? Tanya, let me invite you first on this one.
Yeah, I feel like this question has just been around for ages, right? Like everyone's just asking us about the ROI. But I'm going to take a step back, and I feel like, you know, there are two things that a talent development function really needs to do better. Okay, one is solid branding of the programs. I feel like we don't do this enough. Talking about the what, why, how of the programs, bringing in employee testimonials and creating those larger than life visuals. And I'm talking about, like, you know, major branding. And trust me, it's important, because I've seen the effects of not doing it versus doing it. It's created a lot of impact in terms of how people value that program within the organization, right? And then the second thing is what you were talking about, right? Publishing an impact report. I don't like to call it ROI because that word has just been there for so long. And I feel like it just takes away from the human aspect of what we do. Because a lot of things are going to be intangible. So what I mean when I say publish an impact report, look at things like confidence score, satisfaction index, skill retention metrics, and we all know that we can build this into our programs, and there are ways of measuring it, right? Just the overall engagement, because like I said, a lot of things we speak about are intangible, and we might not be able to showcase it just right off the bat. And I feel like if these two things, just for starters, I'm sure there are multiple more which my colleagues here can talk about, but if these two are done well, we can really get very good leadership support, and ultimately funding, right? So make your programs aspirational, and that's always my endeavor. When you get everyone within the organization talking about it, there are folks who've not been a part of it saying, how do I get a chance to be a part of that program, right? Okay, I'm just going to pause here and see if Sneha and Carlton have anything to add, and then maybe we can move to the other one.
Sneha, let me invite your thoughts.
Sure, thanks, Vivek. Every time somebody asks me this question, you're reminded of a very, I don't know, a lot of us might have heard about a conversation between a CEO and an HR head, where you say that, the CEO is asking, what if I'm going to invest so much amount on these people and, they leave? And the answer you get back is, what if you don't and they stay? So I think that kind of emphasizes the very simple fact that attrition can't be a reason of us not investing in our people. So that goes without saying. I love the points that Tanya just shared. I think over and above that, I feel one of the things that really worked for us to get that sponsorship from leadership is to involve them when we are designing these programs. It is very important to have a strategic goal in mind. End of the day, we are in business, so we can't really just talk about not looking at how we are going to get measurable returns on it. Somebody or the other would ask us. And I think one of the places that as an HR, a lot of us struggle at times is not putting our efforts into numbers. The numbers can do wonders for those dashboards, do wonders for us. So what really has worked for a lot of our programs is finding a similar set of programs that were launched and putting in a numberable value of saying, this was the retention rate. This is the number of leaders we produced post this program. This is the kind of programs my competitors are doing currently, and this is the result that they are getting out of it. So the leaders really need to be convinced from the fact stating that when they're inputting, because it's a good amount of money that goes into these programs as well. But nobody would really mind putting that in if you really are able to retain that level of talent together, if you're able to develop that talent and actually are able to fill up those roles, which are otherwise very critical and are not easily available in the market. So I think it's extremely important to have an alignment where your leadership comes in. And the best is to bring them on board right in the beginning of it, then going to them post doing everything else and asking them, this is what the program will look like, this is what it will answer. So I think just making sure that you're taking them along, you are finalizing on what major skill gaps they were looking to fill in, and you are actually bringing that program aligning to fill in those gaps as well. So that kind of always helps.
I think very, very fair point. So what I'm going to summarize this. So Tanya, what I heard from you is branding. Make sure the program gets branded. In a way, it's aspirational, right? And it's not just one more program I'm going to put you in. So it's aspirational. The second thing that you mentioned is make sure that there is an impact story around it. So towards the end or as the program progresses, what impact is this creating in the organization? Which is something, Sneha, that I also heard echo from you as well. What I also heard additionally from you is get leadership involved early on. Make it as if their footprints are on the program, their signature is already there, and with that comes in, it automatically will have a natural buy-in, right? Phenomenal. Thank you so much, Carlton. I'm going to pull you in for the last word on this one.
Yeah.
What are your take around this?
So Tanya, Sneha, thank you so much. And these are the elements that you need to have as part of your particular program. I just want to make an opening statement here, Vivek and the team, is that, people leave people in attrition. They don't leave organizations. If I have left a certain organization, it's not because I didn't like the organization. It's because I could, as a human being, I could not connect with the other human being. Yeah, that's one. And we're a human being, we'll make mistakes. You need to move on. But we have a different take on it when it comes to an ROI here at the L&T group. And specifically, I represent the LTI Mindtree organization of an 85,000 strong population in over 37 countries. Is that I need to look at my shareholder because our results get published. So when you talk about an investment, it's not only with the CXO, I have to keep the shareholder in mind. He or she is going to ask that if you've not moved on the needle in your investment, or you've put an investment there, what's the ROI? You need to look at the EPS, the earnings per share, the share price, and all the other nuances that come to be. So that today, when we actually craft the particular program, we, like I said in my earlier statement also, is that we identify the critical roles, number one, along with the CXOs. We tell them that you're going to invest in this person. Then the money is not a criteria here then. The buy-in and the focus and the commitment from the CXOs and the participants is what we align together. It's a give and take relationship with it. So I think it solves our purpose of actually creating the program. And we know that we don't have to really invest or really bother about the measure of success at the end of the program, because we know the battle is half won at the beginning, because they know they're going to invest in the right person. That's my take.
I think very well articulated. So people don't leave organizations, they actually leave people. So as long as you're investing in the right people, and as long as that choice is made effectively, we will ultimately create an organization of giants where people want to hang in, people will naturally bring the change that has to be brought into the culture, and so on and so forth. Okay. From the past.
Vivek, I'd just like to add something here, and this is to Carlton's point, right? I feel like a lot of times we're just engaging in high potential development programs to retain people. And I feel like that objective itself is just flawed. A high potential development program is focused on skill building, right? You are helping people grow their skills so that they can level up. And that's probably going to motivate them to stay in your organization. And number two, attrition has a lot of different factors than just focusing on development. There are multiple factors that can cause attrition.
Yeah. That is so fair, Tanya. Absolutely. Thank you so much for chipping in valid points. Team, I'm going to move you from what we've discussed so far onto the future. Okay. If you had a greenfield project available to you, okay, of redesigning a high potential program or thinking of a high potential program that you can design for 2025 or the future, for example, what would some essential components be on it? Right? If you had to design, reimagine the high potential program for your organization, what would some essential elements be inside it? Love to hear your thoughts. Sneha, can I invite you first for this one?
Sure, Vivek.
I think you on a spotlight.
No, not at all. Absolutely fine. I think this is, like I said, this is something which is very relevant from the time of the year, because this is exactly the kind of conversations that are actually happening when it comes to, because we're sitting in the end of the year, we are planning things ahead for 25. So this is pretty much part of the day in, day out conversation. That's part of it. I think apart from everything that we've just discussed, kind of putting a lot of those values together. Some of the things that we are very keen on building it up is to figure out, what is the current requirement from the organization per se. It's very important to figure out, before we really start building skills, it's very important to identify the skills that needs to be built up. So I think how 25 is looking for us in terms of what are the kind of skills that are going to be the most in need, what is the current skill count of that particular skill with us, versus what the 25 would look like for us is a very core conversation that is currently into, right? It's very important bringing our leaders together and figuring out what are the roles that are looking, which are going to be critical in 25, and what are going to be the key skills to fill up those roles, and what is the current availability of that. So I think it's just figuring out that gap in place so that before we even start defining any program, we really have our core objectives correct.
So make sure you get those core objectives absolutely firm in place at the moment. At the very beginning is something that you're bringing up. Fair point, Sneha. Carlton, let me come to you next. What would some important elements be that you would put into a greenfield thinking of high potential program?
So I so agree with what Sneha said. I think a mature program would actually look at personalization, number one, because it's
personalization.
One cap doesn't suit all. Yeah, that's one. I think the second is analytics. Being in the IT field, coupling that with the scalability, because you're going to look at a program which is going to be one step down for the emerging leaders in the organization, because you're going to run a pilot, you're going to see that what are the good things, and you're going to take it forward. And the last overarching thing, I think, which everybody is speaking about, is AI-driven information and analytics that actually knows the data point or the correlation between a PMS angle vis-a-vis a promotion, vis-a-vis what's the earnings per share is. I think if you use the AI in the right and the fruitful way to get that done, I think every organization which is here right now each of us representing the organization here has the answer to what we have, because skills will keep changing, skills we'll have to keep developing. That's no two ways about it. We can't, today's technology is tomorrow's junk. We all heard that, right? And we'll have to keep building on it. But the moment you utilize the technology in the right to your own advantage, dictate what you want rather than taking from it every time. I think that's key to the success of any program and any organization, actually.
I think it's a very fair point, and I'm going to build on this. So what you're saying is the future and what will be a good tech evolution will be PMS, individual's aspiration, company's performance, kind of coming together to give this one individual a lot more personal experience of what his development or her development needs to be for the organization. Is that
Absolutely.
What you're saying?
That's right.
I think that's a very fair point.
Yeah, and just one point to add, the market vis-a-vis the geopolitics that is happening, the wars that are happening, and the company's performance. Every time you may not have the leeway to invest time in certain things. Sometimes you may have to do a boot camp and get people up and going. So I think with that rationale, when you explain it to your people, and I think it was Stanley that said, there is, you don't have to create something for the sake of creating, and you don't have to do it to retain people. Automatically, when people know what you're doing in the organization, they will wait and they will actually add value to your particular program and the organization.
Carlton, thank you. Very, very valid. Tanya, let me bring you into this conversation.
I'm actually going to build on what Carlton said, right? There are three things that essentially come to my mind. And first is hyper-personalized, right? whether it's the assessments that we do, which lead to that IDP creation, followed by rigorous coaching sessions, however we want to build it on, ultimately there should be skills that come out for each individual that they need to work on, which is essentially going to help them level up. And then the second thing is actually the skill building, right? A lot of times I've seen in programs that there are about 10, 12 skills. It's like a year-long program. And you have to understand that the attention spans are really decreasing. We're living in the era of Instagram Reels and TikTok videos. And those are the people now coming into our classroom sessions. So everything has to be built for them. And I'm very pro classroom sessions. The only thing is that the methodology needs to change, the language needs to be changed, and the skills need to be for that particular individual, and which is why I said, hyper-personalized. I'm also all for gig assignments, the live project assignments, and I think both Sneha and Carlton also mentioned that don't create anything new. There's enough and more work within the organization for our HiPos to take that up and add value. And I think the third would be a very clear post-program structure. I think sometimes our HiPos feel like, the next step's going to be my promotion. But that's not always the case. So really just letting them know what's next, what is it that they need to do to move on to the next level, whether that's a promotion or a progression. I'm all for community-driven learning. And I feel like the top talent definitely needs a community where they can talk about what's working, what are some challenges that they have, and just take accountability of the learning that they've had. So these three things, Vivek.
Very, very good points. And I think I love this point around hyper-personalization for sure. I think we've been talking about it, but that level, at least in the at least the Instagrams and the Facebooks of the world have definitely cracked it to a very large extent. But in our organization, given the kind of view we have, that one particular element remains lesser, and especially integrating it with the organization's performance, your individual performance is, oh my God, something that I think a lot of tech companies out there should be definitely solving. One thing we learned, and this is from some other panels that I've just been having a conversation around, is using the leader as an anchor to create a ripple effect in the rest of the organization as well, right? So you don't just touch one person, you actually start touching the ecosystem around that particular person. So that makes a lot of sense. You're right. Hyper-personalization makes a lot of sense. Secondly, shorter attention and shorter duration. So give me that one thing I can just go and do right now versus giving me the entire theory and framework. Is that something that you are seeing will start driving the corporate agenda a lot more?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we started doing smaller sessions, even if it's live, virtual, or classroom sessions, about 60 to 90 minutes, and they're being really appreciated. They love that, you give them a toolkit, which they can take back, like a DIY toolkit, which they can take back and start learning. I've also seen it doesn't help if you send an email to their manager saying this person has been nominated, but what helps is, hey, XYZ has completed the program and here is their certificate of completion. If you copy the manager in that, that's a huge laurel and a huge star on their chest. So there are these minor tweaks that I feel can really help in how engaged our employees are.
To include the manager in the reward or the recognition of that particular certificate. Don't just send it to the person, but also the person's manager, for example, that, hey, he or she has been able to do this, and that works out better. So good tweak on the rewards and recognition, especially around this learning development, also creates an impact. Absolutely. Anything that folks can showcase on social media, it works. Anything that people can showcase on the social media always works. That's so true. And, I came across this concept called micro-learning, which is versus just having long form content, as I was saying, like 30 minutes video, 40 minutes videos, can I give something to a person that they can just tap their way through real quickly, get the essence in next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and bring that to life? So I think that's a fair concept as well. Thank you so much for sharing this. from this, I'm left with the last 6 minutes or 8 minutes at this moment. So I'm going to come over onto the key takeaways you want to leave the people with. Okay, Carlton, I'm going to start off with you on this one. If you had to share the top 3 takeaways you would want the budding HR fraternity to take away, right? Things that they should be doing in their career, they should be mindful of. What would those top 3 things be?
I think the first thing as HR, right, as the HR business partner or the OD partner or the L&D partner, I think consider yourself as the strategic business partner. You are not here for fun Fridays. You are not here for running PMS in the organization. You have to create the visibility of HR as a strategic business partner. That's the first thing. Second thing is challenge the status quo with data and with information. I think we don't really do that very often. We like to listen and, we like to be order takers. We are not order takers. You are the fabric in the company that holds that entire delivery organization together. So you need to do that. That's the second thing. And the last thing is talk about your particular programs and your initiatives. Like someone said right now here, is be all about it. Run pilots if you have to. Show the measure of success that is there, and along with the stakeholder buy-in and all of that. So in real essence, start contributing to the earnings per share on the table. Be present as part of that board meetings. You have to make yourself known over there, and just not about a normal pricing or what's happening in the next quarter. You have to be present to say that how is HR actually driving the earnings per share for the organization. And for that, you have to partner with the delivery organization through that. You can't do that alone. So
that's a very fair point. Yeah. Very fair point, Carlton. And to the first point, which is be a strategic partner to your organization, or believe that you're a strategic partner to the organization, is such a critical shift, right? You're not here to run a fun Friday. You're not here to run the PMS process. And that tick mark is, while a part of your work, but not the core of your work. So know the core and be honest to that. Let everything else flow. I think, thank you so much for highlighting this. Be a spokesperson for your program. Bring proof to the table, and that's a great thing. Thank you so much for sharing this. Tanya, let me invite you over. 3 tips you'd love to share for budding HR fraternity.
Sure. Vivek, I'm going to give you 2 because they're slightly long and I want to share some stories as well. I think the first one is that I feel that HR is seen as a reactive function. And I think this is something that Carlton also alluded to, that, they only respond to issues as they arise. However, I've been around HR functions and they're very, very proactive, and they've been able to anticipate future challenges, look at opportunities, provide insights, and really been able to drive positive change. So this is something that I would say that, and it needs to be spoken about, just being proactive, being more strategic. Like, I loved what Carlton said. We're not order takers, we're actually change makers. There's a lot that we drive within the organization, which isn't spoken about, maybe because we're not doing such a great job of, beating our own drums, and we need to do that more. And the second thing I would say is build strong and genuine relationships. And this is something that I really, really stand by. So back in 2016, I'd actually joined a new organization. And I remember asking my then leader that, a year later, what is it that you would check with me on? And what is it that I should have worked on? And I had my pen and paper ready because I thought he's going to talk about projects and metrics and numbers. You know the drill, right? But all he said was, I will check with you on the relationships that you've built. Now, as a young talent development professional, I was really shocked, and nothing in my MBA had taught me not to look at metrics, and I didn't really know what this meant. But a year later, it all made sense, and this is something that stuck to me. And to date, I think my endeavor is always to really just keep trying to build very strong, genuine relationships and make a difference in people's lives. So I feel like these are the 2 things that I would say.
Excellent. I think that is so fair. So the first one, make sure that you're strategic in nature. Second, make sure that you build relationships in a good way with people. And both of these are areas I think as HR fraternity, we can do so much more better. Sneha?
I think a lot has already been said about it, Carlton, in terms of the takeaways. So I will not repeat what probably Carlton and Tanya said because that made so much of more sense. In addition to probably what they have just said, I think I would like to add is that it's very important to have a right mindset. You have to stop thinking what just Carlton probably said. A lot of us think we are a part of an administrative department. We are not an administrative department. HR is no longer at it. We have a seat on the table and you have to earn that seat as well. So it is extremely important to be a business HR. It is no longer a HR function anymore, And when you talk about being a business HR, you need to understand business yourself. It is no longer operations call about it. You will never understand the skills unless you understand what those skills are getting used into, what those operations are really getting used into. So I think that is a very important key for any person who's trying to drive their career today as being an HR professional. The other thing is invest in yourself. It is very important to be updated, upgraded. You really, as much as we invest, we talk about high potentials, as much as we know about AI, unless I know how that AI is going to disrupt my life in future, I would never be ready for it. And I could never put my organization, that value that I can bring in, be able to, know a lot more about it. So I think the other thing that sometimes we forget is that while developing so many other people around, your personal development is also at the core of it. So it's extremely important to be a continuous learner. Everything is changing. Things will continue to evolve. How can you be on top of all those things? And I think the last thing that I want to leave, and probably pretty similar to what Tanya just said, is end of the day, HR is about people. So building genuine connections, having that growth mindset, being empathetic and authentic in your relationships is extremely important. So I think it's very important that as if you are choosing HR as a function, you are ready to invest in building trust relationships going forward if you want to be really successful in that space.
I think these are fantastic points. Tanya, Sneha, Carlton, loved having this conversation with you. Loved what you shared and brought to the table. I have run out of time, but I bet I have not even tapped into the very basics of what you bring to the table and the depth you bring to the table over here. Thank you so much for your time. I know we will set up separate time. I'd love to get deeper into all of these thoughts with you. Thank you for joining us on the Impact Playbook.
Thanks,
Thank you. Lovely connecting, Tanya. Yeah, thank you, Carlton.
All right.
Bye.